I'm 34, an ER nurse in Ohio, married 9 years to my husband Derek, 37, who works in regional sales for a commercial building materials company. We have 2 kids, Lily, 7, and Ben, 4. We live in a 3-bedroom townhouse we've outgrown, and for the last 6 years we've been putting money into a joint savings account specifically earmarked for a down payment on a real house with a yard, because Lily has been asking for one since she was 4, and I am tired of stepping over Ben's toys in a hallway that doesn't fit both of us at once. By this spring, that account had $62,400 in it. I know that number exactly because I checked it every single month like it was a hobby. 2 weeks ago I logged in to print statements for our mortgage pre-approval meeting, and the balance was $21,180. I stared at the screen for a full minute thinking I'd somehow pulled up the wrong account. I want to say up front that I am not a paranoid person. I trusted my husband. We split finances the normal way. His paycheck and mine both fed 2 accounts, a joint one for savings and bills, and small personal ones we each kept for whatever. I didn't watch him like a hawk because I didn't think I needed to. That's exactly why it took me as long as it did to notice, and why everything that follows still makes my stomach drop when I think about it. When I asked Derek about the missing $41,000, he didn't panic. That's the part that still gets me. He didn't even look surprised. He sighed like I was the one being unreasonable and said, "I was going to tell you, I made some bad calls. It's handled, don't freak out." Handled how? I asked. Where did $41,000 go? He said a guy from his gym had gotten him into some kind of short-term investment thing, crypto adjacent, and it had gone south fast. He said he'd been trying to make it back before I noticed so I wouldn't worry for nothing. He apologized. He looked tired and a little ashamed, and I believed him, because why wouldn't people make stupid financial decisions? I've made some myself. I told him I was angry but that we'd figure it out together, and I asked him to show me the transaction history for this investment guy, so I could understand what we were actually dealing with. He said he'd send it to me that weekend. He did not send it to me that weekend. For about 10 days things were tense but normal. He worked late a few nights, which wasn't unusual for him given his territory covers half the state. He started using a new cologne, which I noticed and didn't think much of. People switch up little things, especially when they're stressed. I did notice he'd started keeping his phone face down on every surface he set it on, which he had never done before in 9 years of marriage. But at the time I told myself I was being paranoid because of the money thing and didn't want to turn into someone who searched her husband's phone. I want to be honest, I searched his phone 11 days later anyway. It was locked with a passcode I didn't recognize, which itself was new, because we'd always used the kids' birthdays for everything. I couldn't get in. So instead I went back into our bank's app and started pulling every transaction from the joint account for the previous 18 months, not just the last few weeks, because something about the way he'd reacted, that lack of surprise, was sitting wrong with me. That's when I found it wasn't one $41,000 mistake, it was a pattern. Going back almost 2 years, there were recurring transfers, between $800 and $2,200 at a time, to a payment app account under an initials-only name I didn't recognize. DR Holdings. Sometimes twice a month, sometimes 3 times. Individually they looked like nothing, small enough that I'd apparently glossed over them in our monthly statements without registering the pattern, especially because Derek had always been the one who did the finances on paper, even though it was a joint account I had full access to. I'd trusted him to flag anything weird. He'd never once flagged anything, because he was the weird thing. Added up, those transfers alone totaled almost $19,000. Add the $41,000 from the investment, and we were missing closer to $60,000 of the $62,000 we'd saved, not the $41,000 he'd copped to. When I showed him the spreadsheet I'd built, something in his face changed. Not guilt exactly, more like calculation, like he was recalculating how much he could still get away with admitting to. "Okay," he said, "it's not just the crypto thing, I've had some other stuff going on, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" He wouldn't say. He told me I was spiraling, and that I needed to calm down before we talked about anything else, and he left for a drive that turned into 4 hours, during which I sat on our bathroom floor going through every transaction one more time, looking for the name DR Holdings anywhere else I could find it. I found it on a credit card statement, a card I did not know existed, mailed to a PO box, paid automatically out of his personal checking account, which I had never had a reason to look at closely because it wasn't joint. The statement had been delivered to our house by accident once, apparently, and stuffed in a drawer in the garage where he kept old work folders. I only found it because I was looking for literally anything with his name on it. The card had a $14,000 balance. Most of the charges were from a furniture store, a women's clothing boutique 2 towns over that I had never shopped at in my life, and a property management company. A property management company. I am a nurse. I work 12-hour shifts where I watch people's vital signs for warning signs that something is about to go very wrong before it actually does. I know what it looks like when a number starts trending in a direction that means something bad is coming. This was that, except it was my own life. I called the property management company's office number listed on the statement the next morning before my shift, using a voice I do not love that I'm capable of, and asked, very calmly, if they could confirm the unit address for a lease under my husband's name, because I was his assistant helping reconcile expense reports. It was a lie. I'm not proud of it. The woman on the phone read me back an address 15 minutes from our house, in a part of town we never had any reason to be in, on a 1-bedroom unit. Lease started 14 months earlier. 14 months, while I was pregnant with Ben was already 4. 14 months ago Ben had just started preschool and I was working extra shifts to cover his tuition, telling Derek I felt guilty for being gone so much. He told me I was a great mom and not to worry about it. I drove to that address on my lunch break 3 days later instead of eating. I told myself I just wanted to see the building, that I wasn't going to do anything stupid. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes. Then a woman came out the front door of the building, mid-30s, work blazer, got into a car I recognized because it had a parking permit sticker from Derek's company on the windshield. I followed her, which I know was probably not the smartest thing I've ever done, but I needed to know. She drove to the same office park Derek works out of. Her name, I learned that same week from his company's public staff directory page, which still had headshots up from some old marketing campaign, was Brianna. She worked in the same regional office as Derek, inside sales. I sat on this for 4 days without saying a word to him, because I needed to think clearly, and I knew the second I said anything he would either lawyer up emotionally or destroy evidence. I am not an investigator. I'm a nurse with a spreadsheet and a grudge, but I am also not stupid, and I know that the version of this conversation where I confront him with feelings instead of facts is the version where he talks his way out of it again. So instead I called a divorce attorney, not to file yet, just to ask what I was even looking at. She told me something that changed the entire shape of what I thought I was dealing with. In our state, taking money out of a joint marital account, even secretly, even for an affair, is usually treated as a marital asset dissipation issue in a divorce, bad, but a financial issue to be sorted out in settlement. But if any of that money came from a loan or line of credit that required both spouses' signatures, and my signature was on it without my knowledge, that wasn't a marital issue anymore. That was forgery, a felony depending on the dollar amount. I told her I didn't think that applied to us, since I'd never signed anything. She told me to check our mortgage and home equity paperwork anyway, just to be sure, since that's exactly the kind of thing people don't realize has happened until it has. It had happened. I requested our full mortgage and lien history from the county recorder's office online, the kind of public record anyone can pull, and found a home equity line of credit taken out against our house 11 months earlier. $35,000, $2 signatures on it. Mine was one of them. I have never signed a HELOC application in my life. I sat with that printout for a long time. My handwriting and my handwriting on that form were close, but not right. The loop on my L was wrong. The way I crossed my T's wasn't mine. It was good enough to fool a notary glancing at it quickly, or maybe the notary never even looked that closely, but it was not good enough to fool the person whose name was actually being signed. That was the moment this stopped being a story about a husband who'd made some bad financial choices, and became a story about a man who had committed mortgage fraud against his own wife, using the house she lived in with their children as collateral, to fund an apartment for his girlfriend. I want to be clear about something for anyone reading this who thinks I should have confronted him the second I found the first missing dollar. I didn't sit on this because I was weak or in denial. I sat on it because the second he knew I knew everything, he would start protecting himself, and I needed every piece of paper locked down before that happened. My attorney told me the same thing. get the records first, then talk. So I kept gathering. I pulled 2 years of bank statements, the credit card statement from the garage, the HELOC documents, screenshots of the property management listing, and because I am apparently more capable of cold, methodical rage than I knew, I drove past that apartment 3 more times over 2 weeks at different hours, just documenting dates and his car being there, in case it ever mattered for the divorce filing regarding dissipation of marital assets and timeline of the affair. It got worse before it got better, because of course it did. I have a friend, Renee, who works in HR at Derek's company, in a different department, nothing to do with his team. We'd gotten coffee a few times over the years through mutual friends, nothing close, but close enough that when I texted her something vague about needing advice about something work-related, totally unrelated to you specifically, she agreed to meet me. I didn't plan to tell her everything. I just wanted to understand how expense reimbursements worked at companies like his, because something about that property management charge pattern combined with his sales job had been nagging at me, specifically, how a guy whose base salary I knew down to the dollar was affording a second apartment, a girlfriend's wardrobe, furniture, and HELOC payments on top of our actual mortgage, without our joint account ever showing a shortfall on his side. Renee told me carefully, in the vague hypothetical way two people talk when one of them clearly knows more than she's saying, that their company had flagged irregularities in expense reporting from the regional sales division over the past few months, inflated client dinners, mileage claims for trips that didn't match GPS fleet tracking on company cars, reimbursement requests for hotel stays on dates when sales calendars showed no scheduled client visits in those cities. She didn't say his name. She didn't have to. I already knew which division. I already knew exactly which six-figure sales rep with a girlfriend in inside sales and a fake apartment had motive to cook his expense reports for 2 years straight. This is the part where I need to tell you what I thought was the worst of it turned out to be maybe a third of it. Derek hadn't just drained our savings and forged a HELOC. He'd been embezzling from his own employer through falsified expense reports to help cover the gap between his actual income and the second life he was funding, because the math of an affair apartment, a girlfriend's spending, furniture, and HELOC payments on a sales salary simply does not work unless you're stealing from somewhere. He'd been stealing from us and from his job, simultaneously, for roughly 2 years, to keep 2 completely different financial lives running without either one collapsing. I didn't go to Renee for confirmation of any of this beyond the vague company-wide audit chatter. I went home and called my attorney instead and told her everything I now had, the HELOC forgery, the affair apartment, the second credit card, and what I strongly suspected, but couldn't yet prove about his expense reports. She told me something I'll never forget. Don't tip him off. Let his own employer find this first if they're already looking. You file when you have everything, not when you're angry enough to. So I waited 2 more weeks. I cannot tell you how hard that was. I went to work, I picked up my kids, I made dinner, I let him kiss me on the cheek when he came home from client dinners. And every single time I thought about screaming, I thought instead about my attorney's voice telling me to wait. During those 2 weeks his mother Carol called me. Carol and I have never been close. She's always made it pretty clear Derek is the son her whole family orbits, the responsible one, the one who takes care of everyone, which is a special kind of insulting to hear about a man who was at that exact moment forging his wife's signature on a home loan. Carol asked, almost too casually, whether Derek and I were doing okay, whether I'd noticed him stressed lately. I said we were fine. I asked why she was asking. She backpedaled, said it was nothing, that mother's worry. I let it go because I had bigger fish, but it stuck with me, because Carol does not call to make small talk. Carol calls when she wants information or when she's covering for something. I found out exactly what 3 weeks later, and it was worse than I'd guessed. Carol had known about Brianna for at least 4 months. Derek had told her. She hadn't told me. Worse, she'd loaned Derek $6,000 from her own retirement savings 2 months earlier when, according to texts my attorney's investigator later got through discovery, he told her he was behind on some bills and needed help, before Megan finds out and it ruins everything. His own mother had helped him cover his tracks against me, with her retirement money, because in her mind protecting Derek's image was more important than telling his wife the truth. I want to say I was shocked by that. I wasn't, not really. I was just tired in a new way. The day I filed for divorce, I also filed a police report for forgery regarding the HELOC and a written complaint with the bank's internal fraud department, because the bank itself had a duty to investigate a forged signature on a loan they'd issued, and because once they investigated, the $35,000 lien tied to a forged document was going to become Derek's problem to defend, not mine. My attorney had warned me this part wouldn't move fast. Banks investigate fraud claims on their own slow timeline, and forgery cases compete for police attention with everything else on a detective's desk, but it would move. Derek's reaction when he got served was somehow both exactly what I expected and still infuriating to watch in real time. He showed up at the house that evening, not yelling, doing his calm, reasonable voice, the one he uses when he wants you to feel crazy for being upset. "You're really doing this," he said. "Over money, we could have fixed this. You forged my signature on a loan against our house, Derek. I was going to tell you eventually. It's not like I stole identity theft style from a stranger, it's our house, it would have worked out. It's not your house to forge my name onto." He actually said, and I am quoting this as close to verbatim as I can remember because I will never forget it, "You're not going to do anything that actually hurts me. You need this marriage as much as I do. Family doesn't air this stuff out in public. My mom said the same thing." I told him a police report had already been filed, and the bank already had a fraud investigation open, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I watched something other than calculation cross his face. It was the first time he looked scared. He laughed it off anyway, a little too loud. "It's just money. Nobody's going to prosecute a guy over a family loan paperwork mix-up. You're being dramatic." A family loan paperwork mix-up is one way to describe forging your wife's name on a federal lending document. I let him believe whatever story made him feel safe, because my attorney had told me the same thing twice now. Let him believe he's still winning. People who think they've already won don't lawyer up fast enough, and they don't stop making mistakes. He made one more mistake almost immediately. 2 days after being served, he transferred $9,000 out of a personal account into a different account I hadn't found yet. The kind of move that looks exactly like someone hiding assets mid-divorce, and exactly like the kind of thing forensic accountants flag in about 4 minutes when they pull discovery records, which is precisely what mine did 3 weeks later. Then his employer's internal audit caught up to him. I found out the way you find out most things in a small enough town, secondhand, fast, and slightly wrong in the details at first. Renee texted me, carefully worded, that there had been a situation in the regional sales office and that I might hear things. What I actually heard, confirmed later through the divorce discovery process when his own attorney was forced to disclose his employment status, was that the company's audit had identified roughly $27,800 in falsified expense reimbursements over a 22-month period, tied directly to Derek's account. He was terminated for cause. The company's legal department referred the matter to the county prosecutor's office for review, because $27,800 in falsified business expense claims crosses the line from a fireable HR issue into criminal theft by an employee, and companies that size generally don't eat that kind of loss quietly once an internal audit has already built the paper trail for them. He lost the second income stream the affair apartment had been running on, at almost the exact moment the bank's fraud department froze the HELOC pending their own forgery investigation, and the line of credit stopped being something he could draw from. 2 income streams, gone within the same month, both because of paper trails he'd built himself over 2 years thinking nobody was ever going to add them up. Brianna found out about the firing before I did, apparently, because she was in the same office. According to 2 people who heard it secondhand from inside that office, and eventually it got back to Renee, who told me Brianna had not known the apartment money was coming from forged loan documents and falsified company expenses. She'd believed Derek's story that he was independently wealthy from smart investing, which honestly tells you everything you need to know about how thoroughly Derek lies to literally everyone, not just me. When the money and the job disappeared in the same 2 weeks, so did Brianna. She was also married, it turned out, and her husband filed for divorce from her around the same time mine against Derek was moving forward, for reasons I assume you can guess. Carol called me one more time during all this, not to apologize, but to ask if I could go easier on Derek with the police report, since he'd lost his job and his apartment and that girl, as though those were misfortunes that had simply happened to him rather than the direct, mechanical result of 2 years of decisions he'd made. I told her I wasn't going to discuss it with her. She hung up on me. I didn't hear from her again until the very end of all this. And when I did, it wasn't what I expected. A lot of people in comments are asking what state we're in for the HELOC forgery question. I'm keeping that vague on purpose, since some people involved could find this. My attorney confirmed forging a spouse's signature on a loan document is a felony forgery charge here regardless of marital status or intent to pay it back later, which a few commenters seemed skeptical about. Also, to the people asking why I didn't confront him the second I found the first $41K, my attorney's advice, which I followed exactly, was to gather everything before he knew I knew, specifically so he couldn't hide or move assets in time. I'll update when there's more. The bank's fraud department completed their internal review and confirmed in writing that the HELOC application signature did not match my known signature on file from our original mortgage paperwork. They voided the lien against our house entirely and reported it to the police detective handling my forgery complaint, who has since interviewed Derek formally. Derek's divorce attorney apparently advised him to stop talking to me directly about anything related to money, which I only know because he suddenly went silent on every financial topic mid-text thread, which honestly was a relief. Derek moved out of our house and into his mother's place. Since the affair apartment was gone the second, the falsified expense money dried up, and he no longer had the personal credit card runway to cover it himself. Custody mediation for Lily and Ben starts next month. My attorney is confident on full physical custody given the financial misconduct and instability, though we're not fighting visitation. Whatever he did to me, he's never been unsafe with the kids, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise just to punish him further. I have some limits on how much I'm willing to let this turn into. The county prosecutor's office confirmed they're moving forward with a criminal case against Derek for the falsified expense reimbursements, separate from my own forgery complaint regarding the HELOC, which is also still active with a different detective. His attorney is apparently negotiating a plea on the embezzlement charge that would involve full restitution to his former employer plus probation, since it's a first offense and the company's preference, according to what leaked back to me through Renee, is recovering their money over a drawn-out trial. Brianna's divorce from her husband is reportedly finalized already. Apparently theirs moved faster because they didn't own property together. She and Derek are not, as far as I know, still in contact, though I genuinely could not care less either way at this point. The forensic accountant my attorney brought in for the divorce found that $9,000 transfer Derek made right after being served, sitting untouched in an account he hadn't disclosed in his financial affidavit. That's now part of the marital asset accounting, and failing to disclose it on a sworn financial statement is its own separate problem for him with the court, on top of everything else. Carol called me again last week. This time she didn't ask me to go easy on him. She told me in a much smaller voice than I'd ever heard from her that Derek had asked her for another loan, more than the $6,000 from before, and that when she'd said no this time, he'd gotten angry with her in a way that apparently scared her. I think some part of her is only now doing the math on the fact that the version of Derek she'd spent 2 years protecting from consequences was never actually grateful to her for it, just dependent on it, and that the dependency doesn't stop just because she finally said no. I didn't gloat. I also didn't comfort her much. I told her I was sorry she was finding that out the hard way, and I meant it, but I wasn't about to pretend her 4 months of silence hadn't cost me anything either. The forgery case resolved first. Derek pled guilty to 1 count of forgery related to the HELOC, given it was a first offence with no prior record, and the bank itself wasn't out any actual money once the lien was voided. He was sentenced to probation, a fine and mandatory financial counselling, with the forgery conviction now on his record permanently. The embezzlement case against him from his former employer resolved a few weeks later. A plea agreement for theft, full restitution of the $27,800 to the company paid out over an agreed schedule, probation running concurrently with the forgery sentence, and a felony conviction that, as anyone in sales knows, makes it extremely hard to get hired anywhere that requires a background check or bonding, which most commercial sales roles handling client accounts do. Our divorce finalized last month because the HELOC was voided as a fraudulent instrument, and the undisclosed $9,000 he'd hidden got pulled back into the marital pot, my settlement ended up covering nearly all of what he drained from our original savings. Between the recovered transfer, his share of marital asset division weighted in my favor due to the financial misconduct, and a chunk of his future wages garnished as part of the agreement to make me whole over the next few years. It's not the full $60,000 back in one lump sum sitting in an account the way it used to be, and it never will be exactly that again, but it's enough that I closed on a house 6 weeks ago. Smaller than what we'd originally been saving for, but it has a yard, and it's entirely mine on a mortgage with exactly one name on it. I got full physical custody of Lily and Ben, with Derek having standard visitation, which is what I wanted, not to erase him from their lives, just to make sure neither of them ever has to learn what their dad's signature forgeries or expense report fraud looked like up close the way I did. I also got a promotion at the hospital 2 months ago to charge nurse on my unit, which had nothing to do with any of this and everything to do with finally having the headspace at work to actually focus, instead of spending every shift doing mental math about missing money in the break room. Carol and I are not close, and I don't think we ever will be, but she did finally tell me flatly and without much drama that she should have told me about Brianna the day she found out instead of loaning him money to keep hiding it. I'm not going to pretend that fixes 4 months of silence, but I noticed it, and I told her I noticed it, and we left it there. Derek still says, according to the one mutual friend who still updates me on things I didn't ask about, that none of this had to get this big, that I could have just let him pay it back quietly. I think about that sometimes, the idea that a man who forged his wife's name on a federal loan document and stole almost $28,000 from his employer over 2 years genuinely believes the size of the consequences is the unreasonable part. Rather than the size of what he did, I don't think he's ever going to see it differently. I've stopped needing him to. The house closes for good in my name only this week. Lily already picked out her room. It has a window that looks out at an actual yard.